Hello, and welcome to this episode of Counsel Trends. I'm Dr. Shanae Anderson with my lovely partner, Dr. Mercy Connors. And because this is Counsel Trends, we decided to go with a trending topic that's been hotly discussed and memes everywhere, is the infamous kiss cam from the Coldplay concert. For those of you who are unaware, there was a couple that should not have been a couple. It was a boss and I guess one of his employees were caught in a compromising position at a Coldplay concert. And so we decided that we wanted to do a study on marital infidelity. And so I think we found a good one. The title of it is called Dark, Dissatisfied, and Disengaged: Propensity Toward Marital Infidelity, the Dark Triad, Marital Satisfaction, and the Mediating Role of Moral Disengagement. And it is a study actually from Romania, and I cannot pronounce the name of the journal that it's in. I think it's Psychology in Romania.
That's what it looks like.
In Romanian, and it's from 2023. And what they really looked at is kind of some risk factors for infidelity, and in particular, the potential mediating role of moral disengagement, which I'd never even heard of that before. To justify infidelity in relationships. And then they also looked at the Dark Triad, which we'll get into, marital satisfaction, and your tendency to be unfaithful.
Yeah, I loved this, actually. I thought this was very, very interesting. I also think it really helps us understand, like for me, sometimes it's really hard for me to understand why somebody would cheat on their spouse. Like, you know, if that's a covenant before God and you both have been committed, and why would you do that? I think this actually, not saying it's right, not saying it's good, none of that, but I think it helped me understand a little bit more how they get there. And I think that was helpful as a clinician. I
really like the whole concept of moral disengagement because as I said, I've never heard of that. And that I was actually kind of excited that a study in 2023 is actually talking about morality. Because I feel like nobody talks about morality anymore in our culture.
It's true. And I think that's really important too, that we understand that everybody is working off their own concept of morality.
Good point.
Ours may be different from others, but I think that that's what it's showing here, is that there are some things that are considered moral in almost every culture. And one of them is staying faithful to your spouse.
And what I think is interesting is they actually were looking at this moral disengagement through the social cognitive theory, which says that there are 8 different mechanisms that people will engage in kind of psychologically to diminish how they understand their immorality or how they justify it. And then what they talked about specifically for people to justify their unfaithful behavior, they gave kind of 5 main reasons in terms of looking at the research that's been done before. They said married people justify their unfaithful behavior by, number 1, diffusing responsibility of the infidelity.
Totally makes sense.
It's not my fault. It's your fault.
It's your fault.
You're a bad wife. You're a bad husband.
You didn't do any of this, but it's still your fault.
Well, so first of all, it's the diffusing of responsibility, but then the next one, it's blaming the partner. Of course I cheated. I'm married to you.
Or exactly.
You don't do
because
X, Y, and Z.
Because you did this.
Exactly. The next one I thought was really interesting. I'd never heard this one before. Comparing their adultery with more serious acts. I'm going to justify that I cheated on you because at least I didn't do something worse.
I don't know what much is worse than that.
At least I didn't divorce you. At least I didn't kill you. I mean, that one was interesting to me.
Yes, that is interesting.
And then the next one's interesting too, by invoking the positive benefits of me cheating to justify their behavior.
That to me is so rich.
What are the positive benefits? Oh, I learned some new techniques. I don't know. I mean, like, what would be a positive benefit?
I don't know. I guess maybe you don't have to fulfill my needs.
Maybe. Wild. And
don't
then
know.
the last one is, and I hear this one a lot, minimizing the consequences.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't that bad. I wasn't in love with them. I love you.
Yeah. We're still staying together.
Right? Oh my gosh. So anyways, again, this study went to look at the mediational role of this moral disengagement to infidelity.
Yes.
And then they also looked at the Dark Triad.
Which I feel like we look at the Dark Triad like every month or 2 months. But I think it's interesting.
It is. So the Dark Triad is made up of 3 components. And do you want to help me go through these?
Yes. So Machiavellianism, which is just a really cool word. It's a person who is strategic and characterized by emotional coldness, exploitation of others, and manipulative.
So really, I think if you're talking about somebody who's got those Machiavellian qualities, cold, kind of almost like reptilian.
Yeah.
And very manipulative, strategic.
Yes.
So that's one corner of the triad. Another one is narcissism, which we know is grandiosity, dominance, sense of entitlement, and attention seeking.
And then there's psychopathy.
Psychopathy.
Thank you.
Psychopathy.
Glad she told me how to say that. And they display a lack of empathy, impulsivity, and antisocial behavior.
Which is different from the Machiavellianism. And that's the one that I get them a little confused sometimes. Because when I think of a psychopath, I think of somebody who's just cold and manipulative.
Yes.
But it looks like here they're defining it more as kind of an antisocial personality disorder.
Right. Well, you have that lack of empathy. Like, I don't care what you think about any of this. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Exactly.
And then I love the impulsivity there because I feel like that really shows like they're just going to do it on a whim kind of thing. And I think that's a really good thing to understand.
Right. So looking at the Dark Triad, but then also looking at marital dissatisfaction, which I think a lot of people will say, well, I'm just not happy in my marriage and that's why I cheat.
Yes. I thought that was very, very interesting. Yeah. When I have heard of people cheating, that usually is kind of the crux of it. That's where it starts. And then like there's engaging in these other behaviors.
Right. So in their study, they had 241 married participants. Average age was 38, and the average length of marriage was almost 11 years.
Which is pretty long.
And for their measures, I just want to go through some of these questions because I think it speaks to what's going on with them.
Yes.
So when they measured the Dark Triads with the short Dark Triad questionnaire to assess Machiavellianism, one of the sample questions was, make sure your plans benefit you and not others. So you can kind of get that feel of Machiavellianism.
Yes.
Narcissism is, I have been compared to famous people. That's funny. And psychopathy is, I'll say anything to get what I want.
That to me, I feel like is really helpful to understand the difference between Machiavellianism and psychopathy, because that Machiavellian is much more like undercurrent. Like I am not going to
cold-blooded.
Yeah, I'm not going to show you my hand, but you're going to know in a little bit that it's bad for you.
Right.
And then psychopathy is a little bit more like out there.
I see it as more kind of self-centered. And I remember studying, a colleague of mine wrote a book on psychopathy, and he says psychopathy or psychopath is a combination of narcissism plus antisocial personality.
Yes.
Which kind of, I can see that here. And it is different than the Machiavellianism.
Yes.
Anyway, so they assessed that. Then they assessed marital satisfaction. Then they also assessed the tendency toward infidelity behaviors, which is a sample question I thought was a good one too, was if I knew that my spouse would never find out, I would have an affair.
And I'm like, wow.
I know.
That again, I feel like that's the Machiavellianism right there.
And that's actually just measuring a tendency to do it.
Yes.
So it doesn't even look at the Dark Triad.
Right.
And then lastly, they looked at the infidelity moral disengagement scale. And one of the sample questions there was, nowadays, infidelity is very frequent. So having an extramarital affair should not be blamed. So it's really clearly morally disengaging.
Yes,
from
yes, that
the act.
that I am in the grand scheme of all people. I'm kind of in the middle, and
I'm just doing what is kind of culturally relevant. Anyways, I love how they did this study. What they found, I thought it was really great. They did a mediational model, and really they noted that there definitely was a connection between Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy, which is our Dark Triad. There was a connection there, but that those three were also connected with a decrease in marital satisfaction.
Yep.
Also, it was interesting that Machiavellianism was linked, as was psychopathy and narcissism, all to gender.
Yes.
What'd you think about that one?
I was actually, I think, a little bit surprised.
When we're talking gender, basically what we found is that it was more likely to occur in men.
Yeah, which I think surprised me because I see many women doing this too. So I think that to me is very, very interesting. Now, I did think about this. Is there a power differential when we're talking about an extramarital affair? So, when we're talking about a man who is married and maybe the woman is unmarried, like there is a little less of, oh, I'm not hurting somebody else. I'm hurting.
I'm just hurting my marriage.
Yeah. But, the woman is like, oh, she may not even know that there's a wife involved.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? As compared to, like, if they're two married people, then I wonder if there's, again, that power differential is a little different.
It is interesting. I was surprised because I think when you think about somebody who has the Dark Triad, and I think if you do research on it, I do think that it is more strongly seen in men.
Yeah.
I guess I was just surprised of how stereotypical it is.
Yeah. But it also makes you wonder, too, is would men have more dissatisfaction in marriage than women do?
That's an interesting. I don't think they assessed that in here, did
I don't
they?
think they did. And so that's where I would wonder, too, is it just because it's a bigger pool to draw from and so therefore then it makes that connection? Or is it that are we talking about gender roles here too? Like, because we're talking about a Romanian culture, is there something
really
there too that is different?
So to go back to the study, what they did find was that I think the biggest results that they found was that both narcissism, psychopathy, and marital satisfaction actually did predict the infidelity, moral disengagement, and that those also predicted a propensity to cheat or infidelity. But Machiavellianism did not.
Yes. Which I find very interesting.
I find that fascinating.
So and they talk about it in the discussion, and that was one of the things like I highlighted and starred multiple times because I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So basically what they're saying is that the Machiavellianism is a lot about their own plans and what they need and how they're going to produce their own plans. And so if they engage in an extramarital affair, that they can lose out on, because that's usually a divorce happens afterwards. True. They could lose out on social standing, like different things like that. So it's actually not helpful for their other plans or their other ideas.
I think you're right, because Machiavellianism, they're really all about the ends justify the means.
Yes.
And if they're only focused on the ends,
yes,
they actually have a little bit more impulse control than the psychopaths.
Right.
To be able to say, yeah, that may not benefit, you're right, my long-term goal.
Right, and that's what I thought was very interesting because psychopathy has that impulsivity issue, which totally made sense to me. That they may just have this urge and then they're going to just go with it.
Exactly, because they did find that people high in psychopathy and narcissism are more prone to invoke or create justifications for why they've engaged in their infidelity.
Which is also interesting to me too. Like some of the justification that they were talking about in here is, it really... If you have somebody that's on the outside, like not involved in the situation, listening to them, it is easy for them to go, what? but that person really believes their justification to the nth degree and will argue with their for their justification.
Well, what I also am wondering, we're only looking at like one side, I think, of the marriage. And if you recognize that narcissists and psychopaths also tend to marry somebody who is maybe a lot more borderline or dependent and highly needy. And so I am wondering about what is that dynamic that they're able to kind of do that, and does the spouse argue with them, or does the spouse just allow them to have that moral disengagement and justification?
I think that would be something to actually look at the couple and see, and I'm sure somebody has some other research study out there, so if you have one, send it to us and we'll do it. But I do think that is an interesting thought process, is looking at the dyad and what's actually happening within the dyad. Because again, I think you're also, like, we have to think of it this way, is that the person who is engaging in the extramarital affair is the one that thinks that they have marital dissatisfaction. The other one who has been offended against may not have.
Well, that brings up a great question. Do you feel in a couple, in a marriage, that one person could be unsatisfied and the other is satisfied?
I do. I think because if there's not a lot of communication, which another issue here was communication and understanding, I think that happens a lot. Think about how many women are completely blindsided by an affair, and how many husbands are completely blindsided by an affair, thinking, I thought we were happy. I thought we were good. Like, what is it? And then the next thing is, what did I do?
Right, which is so interesting that the offended spouse is the one that says, what did I do?
Yeah.
When we're looking from here, that it's actually almost the opposite.
Yeah.
That it's actually the character of the cheater.
Yeah. Now, I do want to point something else out. That the model only showed 68% of the variance.
But that's a high number.
It's very high, but I'm saying that
is true. There are other factors.
We're not saying that everybody who has an extramarital affair is in the Dark Triad. That's what I'm trying to say here.
Or that they're unhappy in their marriage. Or that they're a man.
Yes.
But that is a high level of variance when you're actually looking at a study. And so it is interesting, because I'm, thinking as a clinician, when I am working, because I do see a lot of infidelity. And again, I have a very skewed population in my practice. And a lot of the women I know that are the cheaters tend to have more of like that sex addiction. They tend to have personality disorders. I do think it is interesting. I'm going to have to think about the Dark Triad more in terms of practice.
Or just their moral disengagement. Like, at what point in time are they turning off their moral compass and saying, I don't actually care about that anymore?
Well, let's talk about if they had actually done this. And actually, I've heard that Romania has actually got a high population of Christians. I would love to know the percentage who were faithful Christians.
Yeah.
Because we know Christians cheat too.
Yes. Yeah.
And is that what's going on with them, that there is this moral disengagement?
Yeah, that would be interesting. And then at what point in time was that? Was there like an instance, like something between the two spouses? Maybe it was an argument, or maybe it was a statement made by the other spouse that literally was like, all right, that's my final straw.
But you know what? You're also bringing up something. I'm thinking about the difference between, is moral disengagement an instantaneous thing? Is it like a state issue?
Yeah.
That we had a bad fight, therefore I'm justified in putting my morals aside? Or is it something that is long-standing and is more of a trait? Because how do people stay in these relationships for year after year after year if they're cheating long-term?
That's true. That's true. I think there's a lot of thought process here. And it's interesting, too, because I know that they talked about marital dissatisfaction as being one of the big ones. But they also said that there's lots of other factors within this that could really influence an extramarital affair. And I think we have to realize that when we have any couple come to us or anybody's dealing with it.
Don't assume they're psychopaths.
Please don't do that. But also, there's lots of layers. And that's one of the things that they talked about here is that there's layer upon layer upon layer. They're looking at a few things here, but that's not looking at the whole picture. And so really, when you think about that, you've got to understand the whole picture. But this can help you understand some of that thought process and why that was the result.
I'm curious, do you think, looking at it again from a Christian perspective, if somebody has this dark triad and lack of marital satisfaction, do you think that the Holy Spirit can alter the dark triad? If you have a born-again experience, can it change your narcissism?
I think so. I do, because I believe that when we come to know the Lord, we become, and he specifically says, a new creature. The old has passed away, therefore the new has come. And so I really do think that there is this, and it talks about this, dying to self.
Right.
Not just dying to self in the one act of, I'm now a Christian, but the dying to self daily.
Right. See, I wonder if people that have this dark triad, would they actually authentically become believers?
I think there has to be, because when Jesus says he draws all, all means all.
Yeah.
And so I think and again, we are confronted with the truth. We are given the choice, and I do think that there are some that, maybe struggle with this dark triad, but really realize, because that's the drawing of the Holy Spirit, that I can't do this anymore, because you're also thinking too about, this is just not morality, this is a soul. And that soul is harmed every time they engage in these negative behaviors, right? They think that they are actually engaging in powerful things, but they themselves are actually being hurt by every powerful thing that they do against somebody else.
See, I'm just wondering if they even have a conscience.
I think they have to
be able to even think those things.
I think they have to. Now, do they have a seared conscience?
So that's...
But again, they have to have the opportunity to come to know the Lord, because God said, no one is without excuse.
True. Do you think that talking about some of these factors would be helpful in therapy if you're dealing with a couple?
Not at the beginning. Not even close at the beginning. Now, I do think somebody or a couple that's trying to stay together, and maybe a wife or a husband that has gone through it, and now there's a divorce happening and that kind of thing, helping them to heal, yes. Because I do think, like you said, is there a personality trait that is with this personality trait?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Do these people find each other?
Which we know they do.
Right. So then that would be not only helping the person who was harmed to see, okay, I had a friend of mine say this one time, my unhealthy self chose his unhealthy self.
Isn't that what we do a lot of the time?
It is. And so it's helping that person understand that in a lot of ways, your unhealthiness chose this unhealthiness. Not saying that you wanted to be...
Consciously.
Yeah. You didn't want this to happen. But if we now know that, then how can we shore up some of these areas so that choice is not made again?
Well, and that's where I know, when I work with patients who have cheated, a lot of what I do is kind of indirectly try to help them recognize their self-centeredness and recognize their lack of empathy and recognize, why are you only thinking about yourself? You're in a relationship. Which is
the dark triad.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And I do think that there are times when individuals may move into this dark triad, but they're not there like completely, but they get to that point where they are just done and they want it to be about themselves, and they're tired of it always being about another person, and they just want something for themselves. So I do think that some cheaters possibly move into that dark triad, but they realize once they did it, that didn't make
Which
me feel
brings up
better.
an interesting topic, though. Is the dark triad a kind of state, a personality style, which I think in the forensics world they say it is, and once you're there, you're there.
Yeah.
Versus stepping into it, which I actually like that you're talking about that we can have moments when we're just really self-centered and unempathic, and we just want to do whatever we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I know I have experienced that.
I've definitely experienced that, yes.
So that's why I'm saying I think that some of these things are they are in some people very rooted. But then I think there are times when we move into maybe these symptoms of the Dark Triad, and then therefore we realize, I don't actually like that.
Which I actually think is a really great place for us to end, that we want you to kind of look to see if you have any Dark Triad symptoms. Are you a psychopath? Are you a narcissist? And are you Machiavellianism? Anyways, we hope that this study was helpful to you, interesting to you. We thank you so much for joining us. Give us a thumbs up. And if you've got any other suggestions, please, we ask that you add those in the comment section. And as Mercy always says, we love being part of your life.